"I'm going to check on Melody and Johnny," Jane announced quickly before Thomas could say a word. Swiftly she walked out the door and went to the neighbor's house. Jane wanted to be away from the family, for she knew that her crazed husband wasn't done with his assault on the 4 children. Feelings of exhaustion washed over her as each step brought her nearer to a place of salvation. Hello, you are listening to In My Words. The book I am reading from is titled The Monster We Call Dad by D.A. Riles. This book is not intended for young readers. After each reading session, I will briefly give information about a chosen plant. I hope through my words you will gain insight, knowledge, and a deeper appreciation and understanding of this mysterious and intricate world. Though the road may be long and hard, compassion and beauty can be gained through the enjoyment of nature and experiencing its wondrous gifts. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate all of you who are watching my videos. I never expected doing this at this stage of my life, but when circumstances demand, then it is important for me to create income where I can. Leaving a comment will help my videos get noticed more in the future and allow other people to view them. Also, purchasing one or both of my books will be very helpful. Thank you for your time and consideration. Bending his large frame down to be at eye level with the frightened child, Dad was there for a brief moment. She saw someone inside of those ocean blue eyes. She saw a loving Dad. She saw a man that rarely existed, for the monster was always present, lurking just underneath the surface. Pushing the monster aside momentarily, Dad kept it from wanting to kill her as he brushed back a tear that trickled down his little daughter's face. "Get back in line," the large man said, with a gentle shove, pushing her back into place. "Jane!" Thomas bellowed. Jane rushed out of the kitchen at the sound of her husband's voice. "Sarah needs changing, and the floor needs cleaning," Dad said blandly. His wife did as she was told. Mom took Sarah into the bathroom to clean her little daughter up. After they were done, Mom brought Sarah upstairs and gave her clean clothes to wear. Then she cleaned the floor. When Mom was done helping Sarah, the small child took her place back in line. "I'm going to check on Melody and Johnny," Jane announced quickly before Thomas could say a word. Swiftly she walked out the door and went to the neighbor's house. Jane wanted to be away from the family, for she knew that her crazed husband wasn't done with his assault on the 4 children. Feelings of exhaustion washed over her as each step brought her nearer to a place of salvation. Emotional turmoil followed the aging mother everywhere she went. Yet, occasionally, there were times when she would be able to stop all the noise inside her head and actually seem to be able to breathe. Brief as the moments were, Jane, at times, was able to see the world and feel the warmth of the sun penetrating into the soul of her body. She just wished she were able to hold on to those feelings much longer. Coming to the Sanborns' home, Jane let out a sigh of relief. Seeing Suzanne in the garage with their children, she entered and allowed herself a few moments of respite. Suzanne sat on her outside lounge chair and was smoking a cigarette. "Hey," she called over her shoulder as she watched Jane walk into the garage. "Sit a while." Not wanting to return home, Jane did just that. She sat with her friend and talked as the children continued to play on. Not caring if she received wrath from Thomas when she went back home, Jane eased back in the folding chair, which was positioned next to Suzanne. As Jane chatted with her neighbor, she began to feel anger toward her children, for she couldn't understand why they kept doing things that would provoke Thomas. In the back of her mind, Jane thought, "I should never go back. Why do I care what happens?" Then she saw an image of Thomas in her mind, and the anger left her. She couldn't leave him. She loved him. Several minutes later, Jane told Suzanne that she would be back before night. "That's fine," Suzanne replied as Jane left the garage. She watched her friend as if she were seeing a death march. "One of these days," Suzanne murmured to herself, "it may actually be one." Jane entered the living room as Thomas glared at her. Then he looked at each of his children's faces. Fear was visibly etched within them. A sneer crossed the monster's lips as it began remembering the embarrassment they caused him for running away. Bringing the children into the living room for their final punishment, Dad ordered, "Sit down." Children obeyed. "Jane, get your lazy ass over here. Why the F can't you ever do anything right?" His wife walked with trepidation towards the master of the household. As she neared, she bowed her head with guilt and shame, unable to meet his stare. Jane felt helpless, for she loved this man who would at times become another being. How could she not do as asked? To ascertain temperatures exactly, a thermometer should always be suspended in a hothouse or greenhouse, and this instrument may be purchased with the temperatures most favorable to a great number of plants marked on it. The bins or beds in which the pots containing pineapples and other plants are buried are generally filled with bark obtained from tanners. This substance is more cleanly, at the same time is fitter for the purpose than any other, from its affording by its fermentation the mildest, most uniform, and longest contained heat. When the heat of the bark has subsided, it should be replaced by fresh. If the bark bins are next to the back wall of the hothouse, this can be conveniently done by raking it out through apertures left in the wall for the purpose and kept closed at other times. This is one particular use of a hothouse to avoid sudden inequalities of temperature. An outside door should never open directly into it. There should always be a smaller antechamber or porch, and the outer door should be closed before the inner is opened. Hotbeds, called also forcing frames, are contrivances for bringing cucumbers and other plants to early maturity. They answer, on a small scale, the same purpose as a hothouse without requiring any very extraordinary trouble or expense, and many seeds germinate in them which would remain for years in ordinary ground without any symptoms of growth. The heat of hotbeds is derived from a deep bed of horse dung or tanner's bark, which is covered with fine mold, and a frame being put over this, the fermentation soon commences. If horse dung be employed, the first violence of the heat should subside before any seeds are sown. But if bark be used, the sowing may commence at any time. The bark should not be pressed down very close, as that would, too, prevent its heating. The dung employed should be mixed with litter and not more than 3 or 4 weeks old. A strong hotbed should be 4 feet deep in dung, but those which are made late in the season, as in March or April, a depth of 2 feet will suffice. The depth of the soil on the top of hotbeds must be accommodated to what the plants will require, and must therefore be varied from 6 to 12 inches. It should so completely cover the dung that none of the steam from the latter can escape except by passing through it. The beds ought to be made on a dry place and on level ground to admit fresh dung being applied around them when they begin to cool. The hotbed is completed by placing over it a rectangular frame of wood with a cover inclined like a roof of a hothouse and glazed. The depth of the frame at the back, which is directed towards the north, is generally twice the depth of the front, and the bed on which it is placed is horizontal. Hence, the plants at the front are generally too near the glass, while those at the back are too distant from it. But if the frame be made of the same height all around, and be placed upon an inclined bed of earth, every inconvenience will be obviated, and the expense of the frame much diminished. In a frame of this kind, Night ripens grapes by introducing the branches of a vine through holes at the north end of it, when the frame was 3 feet from the vine, which was trained to a south wall. For grapes, the depth of the frame should not be less than 18 inches, though 7 or 8 inches will answer for seeds. Pineapples require a height of 3 feet. Please like, share, and subscribe. I look forward to having you join me again next time, where I will highlight another plant, and I will continue to read from the book titled The Monster We Call Dad by D.A. Riles, which you can purchase from Amazon.com. Thank you for having joined me.